Okay, it is 6:01 and this is the Growth Planning Committee. Welcome, we have some guests this evening. I guess we can start by introducing ourselves. You are.
I'm nameless, there's no tag here. I'm Tom Smith, I'm new to the board, so I don't have a card yet.
And I'm Jane Evelyn.
Ann Martin.
Galen Widely, support staff.
Nadia Crockett-Curran, support staff.
Okay.
And then we have Dan Saunders is also attending virtually. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good
Okay.
evening.
Okay, good evening. And I guess we should approve the minutes. Is that the next step?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Any objection? All in favor?
I,
Okay.
Dan, are you a yes?
Yes,
So we're having a presentation tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of. So, and we're gonna be, would you like to get up and sort of introduce
So,
yourself?
Do you want me to give you an overview and then we'll jump? Do you want me to give an overview?
Sure.
Yep.
Yes, that would-
So for folks who, were not in attendance at the last meeting, the Growth Planning Committee has been looking over a potential use for agritourism and agritainment. They, at the last meeting, you all looked over the different zones in town. We discussed acreage requirements and some other standards that you'd be interested in. But we really wanted to hear from some farming operations in town. And so as we discussed Black Rock Farms, Helene is here as the owner. She went in front of the planning board for a non-structural restaurant use, which is the closest definition that we have currently to allow for any type of events on a property that isn't customarily a event venue or like a hotel, motel, those types of situations that usually hold wedding events. And so this all stemmed as a way that it would help support a farming operation with a different stream of income to help keep farms sustainable and running in the future. And so I thought it'd be important for you all to meet with Helene to get her perspective on what has transpired on the property for the past year. Also in attendance is Tina Gordon. She's with the Nonantum Hotel, which is part of this partnership with Black Rock Farms that went in front of the planning board. And so they can discuss again some of the logistics of how they take people to the site, how the events occur on the property. And as a reference point, you all have the conditions that the planning board and the applicant agreed to in the previous application. So I think that's helpful that you get a little bit of a understanding of, how their season went last year. So with that being said, I'll hand it over to you all, and again, it's an informal Q&A. You guys can just give an overview of like what you experienced last year, and they might have some questions if that's okay.
So I'm Helene, owner of Black Rock Farm. My name is Tracy. Works there, and also Peter, as you know.
Could you speak with the mic?
Yep.
Yeah. Does it work?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. I thought it was worthwhile to read something, just very short. It says, this is published on the 22nd. What? Oh, God. Okay. In 2024. From Maine Public, probably Maine Public Radio. Maine has lost 564 farms within 5 years, according to the latest data from the U.S. Agricultural Census. Farmers have been challenged by high production costs, labor shortages, unpredictable growing seasons, said David Kent, president of the Maine Farm Bureau. And he said some farmers, particularly those in southern Maine, are facing pressure from developers to sell their land. More than 82,000 acres of Maine farmland fell out of agricultural production within 5 years. Across the board, production costs for all Maine farmers have increased by 24%. That's the past 5 years. So I've been here, whoops. I am gonna read a little bit of this stuff. I'm really delighted to be here because a lot of this stuff hinges on, one thing hinges on the next. They did some kind of a survey in Kennebunkport that said that something like 70% of the people in the port really do agree that they want to keep the place environmentally minded, and that was one of their main concerns about this town. And, we're kidding ourselves if we're not thinking that the town relies on how beautiful it is. That's why people come here. Anyway, and it doesn't look like where I was brought up, where I was brought up in Levittown, New York, which if anybody knows what Levittown looks like, it was God knows how many acres of land that were all cabbage farms that were turned over, and it was GI housing. But it was pretty amazing. There was I didn't even see a bird with any color on it until I think I was 12 years old. That was one of the first houses there. So it was no surprise to my family that when I got up here about 50 years ago, I said, this is where I'm gonna stay. I loved it. Somehow driving by Black Rock Farm, I loved looking at it. It was falling down. It had broken windows. Had no insulation. I can't tell you what a mess it was. But I was fortunate enough to be able to buy it later on, and I didn't want to leave ever, so I started growing things. I did not have a formal education in growing, but I had books. It would have been nice to have the internet, probably. I started by growing about 2 acres of dried flowers and having them all over the country. Down in New York, we got in some fancy books, and we ran that business, which absolutely did not pay us enough to live. We went from there to wedding planning and flowers for weddings and planning them. And that got to be a little much and very, very seasonal, because at that time, Kennebunkport was a lot more seasonal than it is now. Things shut down on Labor Day. So I made all of my money from, I don't know, June, maybe. Yeah, until Labor Day. And you couldn't make enough. It didn't work. We went from there to gardening, of course. I was gardening. So I started gardening. People found me out and asked me to design gardens for them. And we moved into having garden design and installation. So now we do big projects all over Kennebunkport, Kennebunk, Wells, all over the place. It's something that I think I found my niche in that. I do really enjoy that a lot. We increase the nursery. The nursery provide at the farm, we sell annuals, perennials, shrubs, trees, mostly unusual kinds, because you can buy a arborvitae at Walmart, but it's kind of hard sometimes to find beautiful Stewardia japonica. So we grow some pretty unusual things. And we formed, this would take a little talking, but we formed a partnership with the No Nantum, who we adore. So we've always grown vegetables, but no way am I telling you that I have combines out there and I'm growing lines and lines of corn. I mean, we're not doing that. But my main thing that I care about the most is the environment. If I were younger, that is what I would be doing now. I would study like crazy about it. And I have learned as it is an awful lot about, the progression of killing all of our insects to, not having enough pollinators, to not having indigenous trees and shrubs. I've learned I keep learning and learning and learning about it. I spoke to the Seacoast Garden Center a couple of weeks ago and promised them I wouldn't have them running screaming out of the building because of fear, which they didn't. We had a nice talk, but the environment is really important to me. And that hinges on to what we're able to do with our farms. Not just our farms, but I watched stuff about the meeting last week. Was your meeting about this? And there was a lot of you, and I understand this, thinking about how big a piece of property would be. I think maybe the direction you were going in was in order to call it a farm. And to me, I almost feel like if you had something the size of this room and you're growing it and trying your best and trying to keep that land open, do something for them. Because to me, the most important thing that we can do is keep some open land here in I'll speak just for Kennebunkport. Oh, well, I just have down here that I've lived in Kennebunkport for more than 50 years. I hate writing that stuff. I can't believe it. I really can't. I don't feel like I've been here 50 years, but I have. I bore my son, who also works at the farm. We ride around and I'll often say to him, this wasn't here, 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 this. We're just so built up now. And we have housing developments going all over the place. We have to be very careful. Not just to have open land, but to have hopefully open land that some people take care of. I think that that's important to have. Oh, yeah, well, I mean, when we started growing perennials and annuals, did not have very much money at all, so I grew almost all of that stuff from seed. I wasn't buying plugs or anything like that. And we try as much as we can now to grow things from seed, and plus we're really diving into a lot more of the indigenous plants that are important in our environment, especially around here. If you see all the bittersweet and everything that's growing, farmland keeps that away. You know, if you're trying to grow things on a farm or at least garden successfully, like Tina's group is doing, you're combating all of those noxious weeds that grow. And it's important to do that because you go back to the insects. You got to have the insects and you have to have the birds, you have to have the habitat. And the farmers that really knew what they were doing knew about that and took care of that kind of stuff. Considering an agritourism type thing is, I think, a step in the right direction. It's really hard to say, I know you're offering me, you know, a couple $1 million or whatever for Black Rock Farm, but nah, thank you. I'd rather go out there and get down on my hands and knees and weed for a while. I mean, and that's indeed what's happening. There are not enough people who are willing to work that way. There are people out there who are willing to do it, but you know, it's all about money. You have to be able to pay them. They have to be able to make enough money. And one way to make some money is to do some, they used to call it value added. I think they still do call it that. But in some ways, agritourism is value added stuff. So at my farm, I almost gave up on the vegetables because COVID hit and we couldn't get enough people to work. And so I put an ad on Facebook saying, I'll do anything. It is absolute. My soil at that farm, by the way, is sandy soil. There is almost no sandy soil in Kennebunkport except at my farm and behind what used to be Patents. That land behind Patents that now is just lawn is beautiful farmland, sandy soil. It's absolutely wonderful. So I feel like it's wrong for me to have this beautiful amount of land and not offer it to the community to at least be able to grow things. And I put that out on Facebook and I got some takers. We had some other people that came who, you know, did some little gardens and tomatoes, couple of tomatoes, maybe whatever. But Tina came to see us and said, we've been interested, you can stop me if I'm wrong, but we've been interested in doing I guess you went to a farm somewhere and it was like a farm to table kind of a thing that they wanted to try it out. Well, they actually were thinking of actually buying a farm, but it's smarter to try it out first. And would we cooperate with them? And I was delighted. I didn't know how delighted I would actually be because this partnership has been wonderful. And the vegetable garden, they have a woman who works there who is just divine. And we like her too. But we're growing a ton. Now they grew, how many pounds?
It was over 2 tons last year, and for the past this will be year 3,
Right.
so.
So some of it went to the non-anthem, some of it, if I understand correctly, some of it went to the chef. And for, farm to table stuff, and a lot of it went to food pantries.
And we provided a farm share for our employees for free as well.
And I got to eat
Yes,
it
you
also.
did.
It's just really nice for me. So that kind of a partnership can exist and is a wonderful, but a way for that to make enough money to be viable led us down the path of doing what we call pergola parties. And they were low-key kinds of gatherings that the Nonantum, who I think that their chef said, I will not do another wedding. He was like, no. So they do rehearsal dinners and different kinds of smaller events there at the farm. And that's worked out really nicely. And they're booked for things this year as well. We came before so I guess you're all familiar with the fact that we're allowed to, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't think I am, but every 120 days, we can have a paid for event. We can have one paid for event every 120 days. Now, my farm used to be 80 acres. It's now, even according to, I think you guys, I overheard when I was listening to some of your stuff from last week, it's like 35 acres now. And we're right in the middle of it. But that was not allowed for us. We got voted down. I feel like that's really foolish for people to do. It would be nice for me to be able to make a little bit more money there at the farm and, kind of compensate me for some of the things that I do. I mean, I'll, what's the term? Act a little proud. Well, I'll be proud of us, of the farm, the things that we do for the community. I mean, we have employed through the years over, I don't know how many, 200 and something people through the years. Believe it or not, that little farm has done that. I give courses to people from UNE. Some of these guys who are going to be your doctors, by the way, do not know what a pea looks like on a vine. I do help them with that and teach them about composting and sustainable agriculture and all that kind of stuff. The farm itself has never seen a chemical. We've never put a chemical on it. We do not use fertilizers. We have a buffer that I insist upon that's next to the stream. Nobody's ever given us any money, except we did get a little compensation for putting in the pond for irrigation. I mean, we do a lot for the community. We try and educate the community by doing talks in different places and I don't know. Lots of things, workshops. I've done a million workshops. So it just seems to me to be a no-brainer. If we can keep open land, if we can keep sustainable agriculture, if we can pay the farmers, people who are really farming, there are people out there doing it, a little bit of money so that they can make it, so that their business plan looks good. If they go to a bank and they say to the bank, I'd like to buy a piece of land, here's my business plan. I think I can do 2-3 weddings a year here, and I can make this much money definitely on that. And so that, I mean, those are things that are very important and are possible and helpful. Am I right, Tracy?
Do I get to talk to you with the microphone?
Huh?
I get to talk to you with the microphone?
Yeah. Could you?
I should in the house too, I think that all being said, um, keeping land open is expensive. It just doesn't just sit there and be open and beautiful and preserved. It takes a lot of money to keep our farm going, just as the beautiful, magical place that everyone says when they come to visit. So magical here. It doesn't just happen. It takes a lot of work and a lot of money. So doing something agritourism slanted in that way, being able to benefit from that by having events and not just weddings. I mean, everybody thinks we go to weddings right away, but really just an event. It could be on the weekend during the day. Like the
In fact,
benefit,
we're going to do one.
yeah,
We're
like the
going to-
benefit for the KCT that we're gonna do. It's gonna be on a Sunday afternoon. If we could get some compensation to have more than one event a season, that would be helpful. I mean, we're not looking to, cash in or anything, just a little bit, do something different, a little bit more. Because aside from the agritourism thing, being able to have events, only one compensated event. I have this like burned in my memory, one compensated event every 120 days. If you do the math on that for us, that's like having an event in May and then having one, or April, and then having another one at the very end of our season. So
What we have.
kind of hamstringed in a way, yeah. So it'd be nice if we could have like one or two more, so that would take advantage of how beautiful the farm is. And things we do, so.
I mean, people do think the farm just exists. They drive by it. A million people say to me, oh,
It's
so
always been there.
beautiful. We love looking at it. One person said to us one time, there used to be a little trailer. Any of you guys that are around here, there was a little trailer, tiny little thing on the corner. You may not have been here 50 years, so you don't know that, but they'd say when we get to that trailer, that's when we start to breathe. And people say to us all the time, oh my God, this place is so peaceful, so wonderful. I wish that we had some lines of people at the cash register, but we don't always. But to give the community that, for us, I'm just talking about for BlackRock, I have to have a tractor. I have to put petrol into the tractor. I pay people a decent wage. I always have pretty decent wage to maintain that place. And, it costs a lot of money. My dream, I'd like to have it be like a botanical, like an arboretum with trees and things. We have paths through the woods, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff.
But that's part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
It's a
part of
part.
what our vision is, a place where people can come and learn.
Yeah.
And enjoy, in an arboretum style setting, botanical garden. So we're headed in that direction.
Yeah, we just built a bridge.
Very
Yeah.
exciting.
Anyway.
So I'm gonna come at it from the business standpoint, because I have just been so blessed to be working with the two of these fine ladies for the last couple of years. And when so I look up the definition of agritourism, and it says it's a type of tourism that involves visiting farms, ranches, or other agricultural businesses for recreational, educational, or entertainment purposes, often while experiencing rural life and culture. So I think that's exactly what we've done at BlackRock through the Nonantum, where we've created an environment through the use of their land that we're providing experiences for people who may not be from here. Our business base has really shifted a whole lot over the last 5 years, and you have a lot of people that actually live in cities that come up here that have never really experienced farm life. I remember during COVID, we were, of course, everybody was having to pivot to do everything. And we decided that we were going to rent out private fire pits for people so that they could have s'mores. I was gobsmacked by people who had never sat in front of a real fire because they live in New York, New Jersey, because remember back then only New York and New Jersey could come here. And it dawned on me, the things that we take for granted are absolutely life-changing for some of these other people. And so to be able to have the experience that we can provide to people through partnerships like what the Nonantum has with BlackRock is, I think, the secret to our success in the long haul here. I also think that I don't think, I know the No Nantum is a very responsible, very conscientious business that, and we have a very respectful relationship, but I'm also very conscientious of the fact that not all businesses and all people are like that. And so I think what I'm hearing from these conversations and from listening to that last meeting that you had is that it's really important to be able to, for you to help be able to protect these farms, yet give them the opportunity to create an additional revenue stream, to help provide more funds to be able to keep their land beautiful and keep their land as farmland, so it doesn't all become housing developments, which none of us want to see. And so, I'm really happy to be able to be here and to say kudos to you and thank you for, considering looking at some guidelines to put in place for the town to help these farms be able to develop. And it doesn't always have to be events. It can be experiences. We've just joined Real Maine, which is a free organization that kind of unites all the farms in Maine. And there's a farm day at the end of July, which we're really excited about to participate in so that we can expose people to the farm and to the agricultural side of Kennebunkport, because it still does exist. So I
It's
think,
not just the ocean, I'm one that says that all the time. It's like, well, what about us? Because you see all these wonderful things about, and don't get me wrong, I love the lighthouse and all that, but that's what you see all the time, sort of like, what about us? Selfish of me.
it's okay, you can be selfish.
So, yeah.
Could I ask could we ask a couple
Yes.
questions?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Were you wanting to?
Just make sure that you speak in the microphone. Yep.
You're right, that is that
Do that.
microphone issue.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, so that I understand what you're looking at. We talked, you mentioned agritourism that could include workshops, farm to table, weddings. Anything else? I mean, the language has to be very generic in the statutes. And so
Sure.
I'm just wondering, as you witness what people enjoy here and this is a business enterprise. So what is going to attract people? So what else beside the workshops, the farm to table, the weddings? And also, when you're talking about such an event as a wedding, you've mentioned 120 days, and I'm wondering how restrictive that is, because the use of a farm is year round. You can do the winter fest. You can do something with, the hot chocolate experience with cross-country skiing, et cetera, things like that. Then so now you're into November, December, or prelude, being compatible with prelude. So I'm just wondering, when does this start? Or would it be, language that you wouldn't want to restrict it by saying we're only going to do this between July and October?
So what I would say is to, if you could eliminate the word weddings and put social or corporate events. One of the other things that we see besides the social side, which would be this, a pergola party, a rehearsal dinner, a wedding. So leave that as a social event. You have corporate events because corporate America is tired of sitting in a box, and they're tired of sitting in rooms and meeting. What we're finding right now, and we've seen this again, I think it's really driven by the pandemic, is people are looking for experiences. Corporations, so many businesses are working remotely or working hybrid or this and that. And so when they come up here to Kennebunkport, they're not sitting in a meeting room down in Boston. They've come here for a reason. And so if we've provided experiences, like we had a group that we offered to go over, and they helped prune out the raspberry bushes. We've had groups that will go over and help pick the vegetables so that they can then help donate those to COS. So it's those kinds of experiences that we're trying to offer to people. And I think what Helene is alluding to, and I know I've spoke to Galen about this, is Yes, I realize that 120 days obviously encompasses a whole year. And the farm works year round. But the reality is the season here is really the middle of June until the end of October. And so when you look at those dates, you're really pigeonholed into be able to having one event. And so if the language could be changed to say 3 events in a calendar year, that would change everything in how they could operate. So it would give them the ability, and I mean, obviously you can work on the wording how you would, but I just think putting parameters that make better sense for our season here is what's going to be able to help them be successful.
How many people are you looking at when you're talking about the events that you?
Well, for us at the Nonantum, so we have an agreement with with the town that we're allowed to do 8 events that are a maximum of 50 people. Which for what,
the farm.
at the farm, I mean, not at the Nonantum, at the farm. God, could you imagine? Anyway, it'd be like COVID all over again. So we could only do 8 events for 50 people or less, which is absolutely fine. This is what I'm talking about, is by taking and putting some, measures in place and making sure that we act in a responsible manner is, I think, part of what you're being charged with, right? Is to create some parameters to build around this. When we have events, we don't let people drive over to the farm. We have them take our shuttle, which, by the way, we just bought one that is 100% electric, which we're very excited about. I know, we're very excited about that. So, because we don't want to have that traffic going, down over to the property. So I think there's ways that you can build this in a responsible manner. And although, yes, the farm is year round, it's not realistic in some cases to have cross-country trails because they don't have that. And I mean, if you're a cross-country skier, it takes a lot of work that does that to
Yeah.
maintain that.
When you start to say those, some examples about that, all I could think of is just our crazy weather that we have. That's off. Well, actually, we did have one wedding a couple of years ago, and guess what? It was the day of
That
the
hurricane, that never really happened, but it's still.
We got a they were very nice. They gave us a gift certificate. And I mean it, they were very nice, but we lost that revenue. That was one of our 120 day. That was it. And nothing else got booked because that's all we had. So can we do like hot chocolate and all that kind of stuff? Maybe. Of course, you're looking at somebody who doesn't, I think that would be, please don't make me, but just, I've done.
Winter, we're very tired.
But I've done I guess the reason I listed all those things on here that we've done at the farm. I've done almost everything I can to make that darn place make enough money to live on. And I did think of cross-country skiing, but it didn't work out.
Can you guys clarify, so one event, one paid for event, but Nonantum does 8?
It's 2 separate things.
Yeah.
It's 2 separate things. So
So one event is you,
Yeah.
and then you guys are like renting out their
yes,
space.
Yeah.
yes.
But isn't that still an event?
So I'll clarify the 2 different systems we're talking about here. So one is a special event mass gathering license that we have through the town. And so that's what they're referring to when they say one every 120 days. So for an area that is zoned in an area that is not commercial in nature, you're limited, any property is limited for one commercial gathering every 120 days. So that's what Helene has tried doing last year on Black Rock, is she's tried to have like a wedding on the premise. Not including, I believe you had your niece's wedding there.
Yeah.
Your daughter's wedding at that. And again, that's family, and they came in and wanted to ask about that. I said, that's family. It's no different than you having your own personal property and you decide you want to have a birthday party or you want to have a wedding at your own property. You're not charging that person,
Right.
it's a family. So that's allowed, but they're talking about getting compensated They're limited to one every 120 days. What the Nonantum did is they entered into an agreement, a partnership with BlackRock, and they went to the planning board for that restaurant, non-structural restaurant use that is allowed in the free enterprise zone, because that is the closest that we could get to hosting any type of event on the premise. And so that's where the planning board agreed to have 8 of their events on the premise, which is limited by transportation, shuttling, and no amplified music. So it's really limited in what you can do.
So if we're looking at an area that's an agricultural, has reached the, it is an agricultural use, it meets the requirements for being such. So is there language then that's being looked at that would say 3 events per year for a property that has reached that definition of agricultural use? Is that what?
So it's something to look at. I did talk to our town solicitor about the special events and mass gatherings. The original intent behind that, from what the town can figure out, was it was more for when we had one of our more famous residents in town, who was down in DC. They would have protests and things that would occur. And so this was their way of controlling traffic, as a way of, making sure that we're not putting a strain on public resources. That's what we've discovered through the archives on that. Since that time, that permit has been allowed, which again, the town solicitor is a little concerned about that because it is sort of a land use, which really should be baked into your land use ordinance. It shouldn't be its own separate ordinance. And so she's trying to figure out a way that we can make this jive with our land use ordinance better.
But would you be looking at language, we've heard tonight that what would make a farm successful, help it continue, would be to have maybe 3 events in a year, and in that 120 period or calendar year. I've heard different language put forward. So that would be something that would be addressed as well.
Yeah, I think that's where the town solicitor would really like you to focus on that agritourism use, that we allow that in certain zones, and maybe that's part of the parameter of what size attendance and how many you can be limited to. That's where it'd make more sense.
Okay, so we're really looking at the language of agritourism
Yes.
and an umbrella, as an umbrella
Yeah.
for this activity.
Yeah, not frequency, but I would agree. I mean, that it's looking at the overarching, what does this mean? And what kind of parameters need to be put in place? You need to set a limit, and what that limit is obviously is dependent on probably another, another entity here.
Question.
Yep.
Before tonight's meeting, I started thinking about this in terms of who benefits, how many beneficiaries are there? I thought there were 3. I thought there was the farm, I thought there was the town, I thought there were the visitors who would get something out of the deal in terms of learning, experience, and so forth. I'm hearing now maybe a 4th beneficiary, other businesses that might get something out of the deal and so forth. Nothing wrong with that. I just want to make sure I understand how complex the problem is. I was thinking 3 levels deep. Are there more people? Are there more players who can benefit and you should have input to this whole thing? If so, who are they?
Well, I think we have kind of a unique relationship too. And I'm not sure that, I don't know how you replicate it, but I think that, Helene has an amazing gift. And, we were looking for something to be able to round out our business and to be able to enhance the offerings that we have. And it works for us.
But other than having a place where business people can have a conference in a very much more attractive setting than downtown, conference hall. They get something out of going to the farm, you can make some revenue, that enhances your business. Is it, the only thing we're getting as a town out of it is the same we get from other people doing, that wouldn't count as agritourism, I don't think. But how would this benefit the town other than the revenue maybe from your people having staying in business?
I don't
What do we get from that as a town?
So
You get to
I
have
think, we
farms.
need to think about long-term planning wise. Keeping land and agriculture open space is a value in of itself. And so how do we keep and preserve our open space in ways that allows it to be sustainable for the future besides conservation? We do have, almost 25% of our land in town is conserved, most of it's forested area. We're very appreciative of having that, but what other ways can, we protect our open space that it benefits the surrounding residents and the community that they have this open space available to them?
I agree, that certainly would help. We had some discussions at a previous meeting about having, let's say, weddings and so forth. And other kind of events. What prevents a person from wanting to have a Ferris wheel ride on their farm with the noise and the carousel and all the rest of the kind of stuff that might not be, it would bring in business to the owner of the property, bring in tax revenue. Maybe through that, it sustains the rural aspects of the town and so forth. But beyond that, is that, how far do we go, I guess is what I'm asking, to allow certain activities on these rural properties?
Yeah, I think that's a good conversation to have. I think that's what we're here tonight to discuss, like what parameters would make sense.
I'm not against
no.
what we're talking about. I just want to see what those parameters are, so we know how to limit our discussion, and how to make the right decisions.
You make a good point, and I thought of a question for Helene and Tina. When it comes to trends that you're seeing, I grew up in an agricultural community, backgrounds in agriculture, and so I'm familiar with the challenges that you're experiencing. The trends that are occurring in agritourism. Have you been noticing an interest in not only just doing corporate events like meetings there on the farm, but is there interest in people, staying on the farm and actually doing a session of harvesting certain crops and things? Have you heard from people about doing those types of activities?
I think we would have an abundance of people who would like to stay on the farm and have their kids go out and get the eggs and that kind of thing.
Again, I think, when I was talking about experiential vacations, that's something that is very, I mean, the people who are coming here, they've been on every cruise, they've been to Europe, they've done all this stuff. And so when they come here, they're looking for different experiences. We started putting some together 2 years ago, and one of them was taking families out individually out to the blueberry plains and having them pick the wild blueberries. You would have thought we had them like mining for gold, the way that they treated this. And so I think that, to your point, Galen, about having, if Helene could have a little guest house out there, she'd be full all the time.
I'd be.
Right.
Yeah.
Has there been interest too in value added, like learning how to can, learning how to do jams, jellies?
Well,
those types
I
of
was the
things?
kind of person
Yeah.
that
Did all the work.
I'm known for giving things away. So I would have all that. I'd have the workshops and whatnot. And, oh, no, it's okay. You don't have to pay me.
Yes, there is.
But-
To answer your question, yes, there is.
Yeah, but a lot of people, you can ask for money, you get paid for that kind of stuff. There's a lot of interest in it, but I will tell you, there should be more. But there are not the places to have more. That doesn't exist as much anymore. When I first started and I had those horses out there that I had, one of the rules in my handbook, foolish thing that it was if somebody asks to see the horses, you stop what you're doing and you go out with them. Because as a little girl, that didn't happen to me, and that's all I wanted. I don't have people asking me as much anymore. I do. She's there all the time, so she does. That's better, but I still see a decrease in some of it. I see parents afraid their kids are gonna get ticks, and so they don't want them over there in the grass, and they don't know you're not supposed to chase a chicken. They have to help you learn that kind of stuff.
Oh, we have people that come to the farm that think that the horses are props. Like what? It's very, I'm like, no, they're ours. Yeah, you can go over there. They probably don't care that you're there, but go ahead, and we'll walk over. But yeah, just people don't experience.
They don't know.
I'm thinking that we were talking about the acreage allowed for some of these activities. The last time it's being like 50 acres. Was there?
We looked at different sizes at the last meeting. I don't think a final definite was made.
No, but I
Right.
mean, we have 35 acres here, which seems like a pretty large acreage to me. And so, yeah, it, especially from the description that you had, where you can have one event within 120 days, like say through the summertime, and that really limits you to almost one event a year. So it seems reasonable to me to allow in this instance, more events. Also, but we also have to look at how we word something, because we don't want too many Black Rock farms. We don't not want too many people coming into town to buy up land to have agritourism. And we're not really talking about agritainment at this point, which would be more like the Ferris wheel.
That's a good word. That's a good word.
You're afraid that somebody will say, well, Black Rock looks great, here's whatever, $2 million, and, we're gonna put up a barn and we're gonna have 4 events. That's the fear, and then somebody, kind of what's happening with houses around here, that people are buying houses just to rent. Is
Right.
that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
There's unintended consequences when you have to look at land use planning, and that's what the board's trying to figure out, is like, what are the unintended consequences? Could someone buy Black Rock and, put a little Ferris wheel or those type of agro,
Or
those
even
farm.
just buy a plot of land for the intention of not really farming, but having a
Mhm.
business.
A successful commercial.
How you curtail.
Another thing to think about that we always say when people say, well, when we started our partnership with the Nonantum, people thought that the Nonantum was gonna like overrun our farm and we were gonna book out every weekend and what was gonna happen. And what we always say is that we actually live there. So we don't want to have 50 events a season, we need to sit on the couch and relax a little bit. So, when we say like 3, that's a lot to us. So, we do,
But how do we curtail
yeah,
other?
Mhm.
true, but I'm saying about us,
Sure.
and numbers of events, et cetera.
You have the dream and you brought the dream forward and that makes it very, very special.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not there to
Mhm.
do that. How will that dream proceed?
Well, one thing I'd say right off the bat is if we don't do things like this, then nobody can afford to do.
Mhm.
I mean, the kids are leaving. The kids say, I can't afford to farm this place and it's a lot of work and I'm not doing it. Nobody's helping me. So they leave, and they sell it to a developer. I'm not mad at the developers. They're doing what they're doing, but, well, I'm a little mad, but no. But this is a way to kind of curtail that, just what you're saying, to a certain degree. I mean, it's not a panacea, certainly, but it's a little help anyway.
If I may, one of the questions I've sort of talked to people to try to get a sense of what they're thinking in the community, and one of the things that keeps coming back is the noise level.
It is constantly coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, excuse me, but we have a noise ordinance in town. It's supposed to be till 10. I don't know if we can work with it differently. This is my son and my grandchildren.
And you guys aren't doing loud music, right? That's not allowed?
If it's a wedding, if it's a
You are, if it's a
wedding,
wedding.
it will.
So that could be your one event?
Right. But I
Yeah.
think, again, it's like, what, Helene and I were talking earlier, and I believe the town has other parameters in place that would still have to be adhered by, regardless of what is decided here ultimately. There's still noise ordinances, there's still mass gatherings, there's still a lot of protections in place that already exists. So to develop an agritourism, policy, I guess is the right word, would just mean that you're putting certain parameters in place, but that would also be reliant, and they would have to adhere to the other rules that the town already has in place, unless I'm misunderstanding this. So a lot of these safety guards that I hear you questioning, the town already has some of those in place. And so maybe you're gonna be building in some additionals, but there are some, am I right, Galen?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, this, I don't want to be argumentative sounding, but, and I don't know why I keep going back to the 50-year thing. But there weren't, I'm the one hearing all the noise now. And if you're my neighbors are complaining, I'm hearing them mowing lawns, putting stuff all over their lawns and visually all around me. I mean, it's not the same as it was. And you didn't see me in here saying, well, they can't build a house next door to me. I don't want to look at that. Or hear that, or hear that lawnmower.
Hammering, blasting.
Or hammering. Right now, there's 2 buildings going up on either side of me, and we can't even tell where the noise is coming from. I understand that they have to build a building, you know, but kind of, so the argumentative part is sort of annoying when somebody just gets mad at one time a month, they're gonna hear music of people happy and dancing and other choices, they can look at another 5 houses, because I think I forget how many houses we think we could put up there, but something like, what?
As many as well as.
Levittown.
There we go,
So-
full circle.
So, Helene, I do have a question. You know, the board knows about the noise, but when it comes to traffic to the farm, when you do decide to have the large events, how do you manage where people park on the property?
When we've done the weddings for friends
Yeah.
and for relatives. Well, Zoe had a, trolley.
Yeah, we had a trolley.
And we have for the other wedding that we were going to do, but then the hurricane came. We had an agreement with Kathy Gay about trucking people back and forth in her trolley. We also have the front, our
There you
field
go.
in the front that we're able to park on. We could park, the weddings that we've had have been about 140 to 145 people. And we've had no difficulty parking. And we called the highway person in. Were you there for that, Gina, for the highway person? Who said this is fine, this is good visibility and whatnot.
Mhm.
So.
That front field, what's planted there?
Nothing.
It's horse
Nothing.
pasture.
We
Just
put
horse
the horses
pasture.
in the back.
Okay.
Can I follow up with something you said? You mentioned that you've had weddings and you've had 145 to 150 people. So we're not talking about 50 people in an event. We're talking about how many?
These are
Two
two separate, but it's two separate
I
things.
understand
Yeah,
the two
okay,
separate things.
yep.
So we have the
She's
50,
okay for,
the 8 events of 50 people
Yep.
per event. And then what is your proposal in terms of the number of people for a wedding event, let's say?
we don't really have one right now, that's not so much what we were gonna talk about here, but I will say that the town says I think it's after 250 people,
You need a best.
which we're not planning, I don't want that there.
We live there.
We do, you know, that's us though. So if you're talking about other people as well, town has in place that after 250 people, you gotta go before the planning board. Am I correct?
No, you
It's
just-
administrative through the code enforcement officer.
Yep.
Yeah, you file for a permit.
Right.
Yeah.
So in other words, there's people watching out for that. We have no desire to do that. I don't know what other people would do. Does that help you? Did that answer?
Thank you.
I will say I'm very impressed by the way you care for your land. I was, in terms of, being careful of the land. I was reading about regenerative farming, which is the kind of farming that we would like to see locally, where you don't use a lot of pesticides and chemical fertilizers and that sort of thing. So when you were talking initially, I was very impressed with
Thank you.
how you.
We really do believe in it and actually probably within the next year or so, I'll be in front of the town talking about pesticide and fertilizer use. Because all of that, I came in, there was a housing development that went on behind me and is adjacent to my land. And I was worried because my pond that I irrigate with is groundwater. That means it comes down off the hill and goes into that and then goes into my vegetables. And one of the men on the planning board said, when I voiced my concern, I never thought of that. And I think that that's important, because people do need to think about it, but some people just don't, because they just don't know that they have to think about it. So it is important. Thanks.
So let me ask a question, Jim. This is a partnership among the farm, the town, and various businesses. Yeah, that's how I see it. And I'm wondering if we all work together to make this utopia where you can run your business, keep afloat, keep a lot of people happy, make a lot of kids happy, et cetera, et cetera. The town is doing well. All of a sudden, you want to sell the property. And somebody wants to buy the property because it's very attractive, all those other kind of things. And they want to do more with, or maybe want to break up into 30, 50 different housing lots and sell it. What control, if any, do we have over that? Since we've gone into this partnership with the objective of maintaining this pastoral bucolic experience in the town, which we all want. And saving businesses and having good experiences with people and so forth, getting a favorable impression among visitors to town. So all these things are win-win-wins for everybody included. And all of a sudden, the dream goes away because you sell the property. So what protections do we have to prevent that from happening?
Unfortunately, you don't. New owners can have new visions and they could be quite different than what the original owner intended.
We
And
can make
that's,
this thing so good, so perfect, so utopian.
Yep.
that somebody destroys it.
yep, someone can buy it and
Well-
say, I want to have,
But-
however many units and
Yeah.
subdivision and.
I think that's why it's really, really important what we're doing right now and the parameters that we do set for the
Yeah.
land use around this concept.
If we make it contingent upon the status quo maintaining.
Well, no, you can't make a sale of a property contingent, like you can't make somebody continue what they're doing. But we can make it that that it's very,
Economically feasible.
economically feasible and someone would want to buy that and keep it going. If we make obstacles and challenges and limitations, it's gonna be sold to a developer, period.
Single family is fairly permissive in town. And so that's what most people would do is by right, they would try to do as many single family as possible because it's permitted in every zone. The only other way that logically that it would stay that way, and that's a legacy decision for the property owner, is they could enter into a conservation easement. Like that's, if that's the legacy they want to leave, you can certainly do that, but there is a cost. People think that, oh, it's just an easy thing to do. It does cost to preserve land. And so that's just something to,
Cost your heirs.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so if I do that, then.
Yeah.
Adam is limited to, unless somebody said, wow, this is wonderful, I'll pay more for this piece of land that's under whatever. You have no control over that.
Nope.
It's hard to sell.
yep.
I have a question. If the wording went from within 120 days to what Tina said of, yeah, 3 events per calendar year. Are weddings the big moneymaker? Is that what you'd want your 3 to be? So probably,
I would not think that we should limit it to that. I don't think that's what we would do.
but could it end up being
It could end
that
up being that because
Yeah.
there's a wedding and
knocking on our door every
Yeah.
day.
that there's a wedding June, July, August, or July, August, September?
But like, we're going to do something with the Conservation Trust. And that's not gonna be noisy, it's gonna be in the afternoon, but hopefully it's gonna be big. Because
Is that your event or your event?
it's kind of a, right, combination of, it's for the Conservation Trust, they're the ones that are gonna benefit. from this. But we're all
Your
helping.
8 events.
I misspoke.
So I'm just thinking with, as one of the 8 events and something like the Conservation Trust, which is be very popular.
Mhm.
I feel like 50 is too few.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk to the planning board about that, but we'll talk to the planning board about that.
You know, one of the things that's hard is to look at land and see it's so beautiful, and then you are entering into the conversation of what is the highest and best use of the land, and unfortunately, right now, it is to use the land perhaps contrary to what your vision is of it right now.
Right.
So you know, it's great that you've come here this evening and shared this with us. It helps us.
It's pretty hard, and I will say it's all pretty hard. It's hard.
Sure.
I mean,
Across the board.
right across the board, yeah. You want to take care of it, but it's not always that lucrative to do. I mean, I make jokes about the beneficial insects that we buy. He makes jokes about them because he does he pays for them. He can't see any, they're in little vials and disappear.
I think of ideas. She says she's already done them, you know.
Yeah, but it's not easy. And yes, you know, you have to think of your own retirement, your own this and that. There's all this stuff. It's so complicated.
Sure.
But I think you do the best you can. And I think that I do believe you err on the side of taking care of the land. Knock the people out of the scenario because we're hurting ourselves. I mean, if you wanted me to go on and on about that stuff, I know more about that than I do about this.
So now you kind of indicated, I think at one point you would like to see more than 3 events in a calendar year. Is that correct?
I don't know what the magic number is. I
Well,
don't think
that's-
anybody is.
That's
I-
why I think we could set that in the parameters.
Right.
Maybe, you know, 2 big weddings with loud music and then X number of events with no music that, you know, cause
Acoustical.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
So
so
that's how
more
it's
than-
set up for us, is
more than
we do
3.
acoustical.
because if you don't hear it and the only way you see it is driving by and you see
Right.
75 cars parked, who cares?
So for the record, last year, did you receive any complaints?
The only
The
thing
town,
was-
the town has not received any complaints from code enforcement for noise or any of that.
And if you had people who were, what we talked about, where they maybe stayed over for a period of time and helped work the farm and found, you know, they had maybe classes,
You mean sleep there?
like sleep there.
They don't sleep
But
there.
but there
No,
was
the
talk of that a little earlier, that.
always potential for that.
The
Yeah.
question was posed if there's been demand for it. And there would be demand for, if they built something, they would come. They don't currently offer that.
Right.
Nor is it in the plan,
No.
with the existing, structures that they have.
But I
So-
don't know if we would be working something like that into whatever we do in terms of.
We'd probably need to
It's something to think about.
for the what ifs.
I mean, I think it'd be a great thing to do.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what I do with all the little things in the house that I have to put into a closet and lock, but, you know, but I think it would be good for people
Mm-hmm.
to be able to experience.
To have
Like,
the
set them
farmhouse for a weekend, is that what we're speaking
Yeah,
of?
for a weekend
Put
or
in some
whatever,
5 tiny homes in the back
we can do that.
Mhm.
Not
Yeah.
sure about all the time.
and rent them out to, you know, for an agro weekend. And they learn jamming and
I don't like.
It'd be great.
shrubbery and,
I don't
All
like
that
to do what.
rock wall building.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't impact anybody.
I just remember in Lancaster County that people would always want to go see the Amish farms. and,
Oh,
like
oh, yeah.
experience what it's like to be an Amish,
Yeah.
you know, and they do have experiences available for people that you can ride in a horse and buggy and you can live on the farm and turn butter and do all that stuff without any electricity. And it does open people's perspectives that there are people that live differently, and this is where your food comes from, and just a different way of life. And so people do pay for those experiences. I didn't know if there were packages at Nonantum that they're currently doing to get people out to the farm. But that's just, there is value added in that, in those
I just want to
experiences.
say that we have talked about it personally with fear. You know, right, Adam?
But it's a
Good.
good thing to talk about. It's an experience we have talked about. That it would be nice way future for people to come to have our farmhouse and get eggs from chickens and go out and pick vegetables and cook them for themselves and, help feed the horses and whatever other menagerie we collect.
Yeah, so we've got to work that into the future parameters.
I hear you.
This is Dan. Can I say a few things?
Yes.
Certainly.
All right. Hey, first, thank you, all for coming, tonight and talking to us. And I apologize that I was not able to be there, in person. And it certainly would be easier for me to interject if I was. But I wanted to kind of point out a couple things here. One, in our comprehensive plan, there is a goal to protect resources, forest resources and farmland from negative impacts of development. So that's a goal that sort of sets some strategies where we need to help provide support for farms. And then also to put in things to protect farmland. So that's sort of the key thing that we, as we consider our ordinance that we would write, we want to make sure that that's consistent, right? And one of the concerns we've had, and I had, and I think we've expressed, and you, I think, acknowledged, is how do we craft something without having an unintended consequence? Where someone comes in and sort of takes advantage of the ordinance to buy up 30 acres of land, sets up a tiny little farm as sort of a secondary business to try to drive in to be able to have, multiple events that are really not maybe farm related, but it just happens to be on a farm and they kind of call it agritourism. And that's our concern, right? Because what we want to do is protect the farmland and protect farms. People who, that's their primary business, is a farm, and there's things associated with that. And this is additional income to help them succeed. And the two of you, Nantum and BlackRock, have developed this really good relationship that takes care of some of the concerns such as parking and other aspects that could be a negative in the area at times. And so, but that's very unique, as you said, Tina. And how do you, it's not something where we could craft an ordinance says, farms along with, some hospitality business within town can work together and do these things. So taking a step back, how do we craft this so that BlackRock can do what they do, kind of independent of having no Nantum, because, right? So those are all the challenges, I think, in us crafting this. But at the end of the day, I will say that I want to be supportive of BlackRock Farm to remain as a farm into the next generations. If that's what you choose to do as the owners, right? At the end of the day, it's the owner's decision. So again, thank you much for coming to share with us.
Thank you. I just ask a question. This concept isn't new, and I'm sorry I didn't do any research to see what other towns have agritourism that's built into their the makeup of their town. Have you looked at other entities that you might be able to replicate some of the language?
Yeah, they're definitely going to be researching that. I mean, I personally added the city of Presque Isles agritourism into their land use before I moved down here. So there are other towns that you can certainly look at.
All throughout New England, there's lots of different places to look at. So I think that'd be interesting to read where some other places have been successful.
Are there any more questions that people have, or any more thoughts on this topic? Okay. What's next on our agenda?
That's it. That's all you have on for tonight. Yeah.
Helene, I just want you to know that my son, George, who's now 24, still has a plant that you gave him.
See?
It's still live.
In horticulture?
I was there. No, not even close, but he still has that plant and it is huge.
Oh, good. That's wonderful. That's good. So he knows the Latin.
No money was made on that plan.
But you made a memory.
They do keep me away from the people if they can.
He was probably 9 when you gave it to him.
Well, that's nice to hear. That's really cool. Good. That's nice. Well, we got a lot of really nice young people work for us. I can stand on my porch and say, when your kid worked for me, and your kid worked for me, and you're a father, you and your kid at the same time worked for me, and really, they all,
Oh,
it's a nice place to work. They get good experience there.
Well, Helene, Tracy, and Tina, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us.
Thanks for
tonight.
asking us.
Offer testimony, and we'll certainly, if we have any questions, we'll reach out to you and keep you abreast on how things progress forward.
Come to the meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You can't take it home.
I'm gonna get one.
Thanks.
Thank you.
thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Good night. Is there anything else?
So next steps, what would you like to do now that do you need time to digest things and
Well,
think about it, or?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where in the comprehensive plan would this be inserted? What would this be considered?
So strategy 18, support forestry and agricultural uses activities such as agritourism, backyard chickens, farms, farm stands, and firewood sales. I think that's a pretty good strategy. And that falls under the goal of protecting forest resources and farmland from the negative impacts of development. And that policy is to support agricultural and forestry activities.
Okay,
So I think that's quite clear in our comp plan.
okay, so
Mhm.
that would be, and
Yep.
so you would propose, I guess one of the concerns that I have is the number of people at an event, if it's a large, because that seems to be the feedback that I keep getting, the resistance. And it'd be great to try to anticipate any resistance and see if we could resolve it before it, it became an issue. But that, I understand what they're saying, that one or two events with that larger a group would be beneficial to them, and that would be beneficial to the farm. I know was it Patterson's farm? Is that what it was called?
Pattonberries.
Pattonberries. I really miss it. And so I listened to what they're saying, and so it would be wonderful to be able to continue with a place where a son can go and get a
Mhm,
plant and have it for forever. So, but the noise factor is absolutely going to be a question I think that people have. I just had that conversation with someone today, so.
Yeah, I would recommend to the board to take a look at section, it's 240, 6 point, I think it's 11. I think that's where it's at. That's your sound pressure standard. And so that sound measurement occurs at the property lines. And there's two different levels, before 10 PM and after 10 PM on what those levels are, lower, especially at night. So we already have those standards in place, but just take a look at those and see, how that would apply, especially when you have a large property of 35 acres or 50 acres,
Yeah.
whatever it is, and the distance from where that event's taking place to the property line. That's where that occurs.
Question
mean-
for you.
Go ahead.
So apropos of what you're saying, if our objective as a committee is to try to make this a win-win-win, as I said before, for the farm, for the town, and for maybe other people who like to enjoy the experience. There are many ways to do this, and it's feasible. I don't know how you actually do this, but to say, no way we can allow large weddings with noise at night. Make your money other ways. Have as many daytime events as you want. Bring as many people in, do all these kind of other kind of things and so forth. If you as the owners of this farm want to stay in business by bringing in more revenue to keep the business afloat, there are many ways to do this without having this particular event. I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying, is it within our purview to say no to this and yes to that?
So I believe you could put performance standards for any use that you so choose. And again, I would look at your, I believe it's Article 7, if memory serves me correct. Article 7 is your performance standards for the different uses in town. So again, take a look at those. You'll get an idea. Yeah, I can send them. Yeah.
Thank you.
The performance standards have for certain uses, here's the criteria that you need to follow in addition to the town-wide standards under Article 6. And so that and those performance standards are made specifically for certain uses because of how unique that use is. It's really tailored for that.
I
So
don't want to get into specifics in one particular event now.
right, that's
We're
where,
just asking a general question.
Yep.
Is within our, sounds like it is, within our purview to say to the stakeholders over here, this is out because of this. Try these other three things that might give you the same result, i.e. revenue to sustain your business and so forth, without angering other stakeholders over there, e.g. the neighbor. You know,
Are we allowed to
No.
get as specific as like? You're allowed 2 events at at 150 people or more within a year. You're allowed, I'm making this up.
Yep.
You're allowed 10 events at between, 50 or not, that's a lot. You're allowed 5 events between 50 and 150, and you're allowed 10 events under 50.
so you
Are
can.
we allowed to be that?
You could be very specific,
Specific.
or you can say anything under a attendance of 50. The number shall be capped as determined by the planning board during their site plan review application. And so that would be then a condition that's added as part of the site plan review process.
For every event?
No, so like so if you have a farm and then you say, okay, the language that says for the performance standards, it says anything under attendance of 40 or less people is determined by the planning board. You will go in front of the planning board for a conditional use application under site plan review. And then you'll plead your case of this is what you would like to do. And for the number under 40, the applicant wants, let's say 20. The planning board could say, we've heard feedback from the neighbors because you have to notify the abutters whenever you have an application. And the abutters come out and let's say they're against it. So the planning board could say, you know what, because of the opposition, this is a new use, we're gonna cap you at 10. Come back to us in 4 years and.
Wait,
Yep.
is making, showing people how to make jam and whatever, all this other stuff she does, that's a new use on a farm?
It would be agritourism because you're trying to do that experience aspect of it.
But doing those things, like you said,
You're doing the activities.
they wouldn't probably disturb the neighbors. So what I was getting at was to your point, that can we steer, not just these folks, but steer anybody into a direction that says, this is the, if you really want to maximize your revenue, to sustain your business, okay, which we want to keep in this town, do this and this and this, and don't do weddings.
I don't think you could micromanage an operation. Again, I think you can certainly say, no, we don't think that these events are warranted and we're not going to put this in our ordinance. And that's the end of discussion.
How's that different from saying you can have 3 events with 50 people or more and 1 event with 300 people or more? How's that less micromanaging than what I just suggested?
You're saying though to make suggestions to them
Yeah.
about their operations now.
If their objective is to make enough revenue to stay in business, aren't we allowed to suggest to them ways to do that while not creating other enemies, like for instance, the homeowners live around it? I'm just asking that question.
Well, these
You're
are
making,
just-
you're making suggestions. That's
Yeah,
where
yeah.
I'm saying that that's not our purview is looking at what makes sense from a town policy perspective on the comprehensive plan.
Right,
So we're allowing them.
What
to
the
come back and
parameters
say,
are gonna be.
"Well,
Right.
3 of A, 2 of B, and 7 of C, we look at those and say, okay, or we say no, instead of doing, 3 of this, make them fewer people.
How
Fewer
many,
events and
Yeah,
fewer-
maybe
I
there's,
would, I was
Go
gonna say,
ahead,
I would think we would want to focus more on the potential impacts to the, local community around the farm versus being prescriptive on the type of events. So, for instance, having 150 people at an event that they all have to drive their vehicles there is one thing versus having 150 people at the event and they get bussed in, from Nonantum. Right, because now you got less traffic on the road, less congestion, less noise associated just with the movement of automobiles.
But isn't that prescriptive?
Well, is there,
Right, so talk about, maybe the parking, how do you manage parking? That's an area, right? So if we don't allow high amounts of parking, then they would have to have some type of alternative arrangement with somebody to bus people in, like they talked about, using trolleys and so forth.
yeah, I mean, it's parking and noise.
Right, parking and noise is usually what everyone gets, that, and it's not so much the parking as much as all the traffic.
Right.
People get
Right.
upset about the traffic. So-
Traffic and noise, and now we can restrict it to non-acoustic music. I mean, most weddings you have acoustic music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which would make us want to limit that to maybe one event,
as what you're saying there, I think, we have to remember that Black Rock Farm, as it is today, isn't what we're really looking at. We're looking at tomorrow and what's going to develop from this, and so those are it's, we look at the charm of this and think, oh, this is going to carry on, and that may not be the case, and we're trying to protect it, but I
Right.
think that it's, not to exceed, language is very general, something with not to exceed 50 or 100. Because it might be of interest, because it's the beginning of this use in town, and uses can be further amended as we progress, as we see that has worked. And that maybe 150 can be a viable, parking is handled, the noise issues have been dealt with. But to start at a point where it's kind of hard to withdraw, to go backward a little bit.
How many locations are we really talking about in town? There's Black Rock, there's Rocking Horse,
Said what, there was 4
5
or
acres.
5?
5 acre.
Let me pull up the.
How big
notes.
is 5 acre?
I think there were
I
6.
think it's under 5 acres.
Yeah, so you had the Christmas tree farm off Log Cabin, Rocking Horse, the Blueberry Farm, and 5 acre farm stand. I mean, it's a farm stand. And you have Black Rock. So that's what we've counted, like research, we figure out those were like the entities that are sort of farming, but a lot of them don't have the farmland exemption. I think Colleen's one of them. She doesn't get the farmland exemption. We know she's a farm. But you don't have to take it. It's a voluntary type thing to go through. And so we looked at the parcel sizes, and again, that was in the memo that we sent out at the last meeting. So you have an idea of like each zone, how many parcels meet a certain acreage requirement, if that's something you want to look at.
So Blueberry Farm doesn't really farm.
Blueberry, yes, they have blueberries there, actually.
Oh, they do.
Yep.
Did they?
Miss Morgan, that was her farm that she bought, that was one of her
So
first
does
properties. and-
she collect- I know they have the maple syrup.
Yes, they do maple syrup also on the property.
But do they sell blueberries?
I believe they do. And again, I've had discussions with the operation about doing U-pick there. So I know that there's blueberries currently there. And they're 31 acres. So really Helene's Black Rock Farm is 36, the Blueberry Farm is 31. The rest of them are under 10 acres, roughly.
But I guess my concern with this, and we talked about this in the last meeting, was asking how many large parcels there were that could conceivably be transformed into a farm, made into a farm, and then now you have an agritourism use that they would want to bring in, because it's a commercial operation, it's a business, and let's make it work. And so I was concerned about what what door was being opened for that sort of activity as opposed to the, someone who's been farming something for 20
Mhm.
years. It's a
Absolutely.
difference.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Because we want that farming to be the primary use,
Correct.
right? And it becomes, I mean, and if you're barely making a living on farming and you can make a fair amount of money on 3 or 4 events a year, from a dollar standpoint, those other events may be the actual driver on how much money you're earning in a year. So being able to define the farming as a primary use will be difficult, right? And you can't say it's what generates the most income because it may not.
So you're suggesting that over time, the use may be more the tourism than the farming and.
I
And
mean, it may drive
think
more
we just-
revenue.
I think we discussed this too at the last meeting that, there might be land right now that could be farmable. But I know young people in general, they cannot afford, the cost for farmland it's a high barrier. Unless you're born into it, it's very hard, that barrier getting in is very hard to get into. And so, with agritourism as part of your business plan, can you make a viable go of it and actually have a resurgence of farming in the community
Well, it's
in a limited scope, for the
like a
agritourism.
percentage, but, I mean, to purchase, one of the things that we were doing on our farm was everybody was borrowing equipment from each other.
Right.
It's because you didn't want to pay $60,000 for something to come in and work for a day.
Mhm.
You didn't want that to be taken care of. So there are logistics. But I look at this and I think, oh, well, if there was, and I don't think this is the case anymore, but if you'd had a large 50-acre parcel, was there any benefit to carving out, saying, 20% of that parcel to be actively engaged in this type of farming or forestry? And the other percentage could be available for a commercial activity. I'm just kind of running it in my
But they're
head.
sort of integrated, aren't they? I mean, the part that is being farmed is a part of the experience. If they have people coming.
I think our goal, how many parcels did you just read off? 6?
6.
I think our goal is to today, moving forward, create a land use ordinance with parameters that hopefully encourage the people who currently and in the future will own those properties to maintain them as some sort of farm / agritourism, entertainment, whatever, as opposed to selling them to a developer, right? That's the goal.
Mhm.
So our job is to create these parameters that enable them to do that with the least amount of impact on surrounding homeowner, property owners, traffic, et cetera.
Okay, so there are
Right.
places where they're doing this already,
Yes.
and you know what those places are.
Yeah.
Towns. So seems like what you are requesting of us is to research those and look at those.
I would say so. I would say it's a good start for, the board, the committee to think about, looking at other towns, what you like from other towns, what works. What strikes that balance that we're looking for that isn't going to be a facade farm or a faux farm. We want it to be a working farm with the agritourism as an accessory component to the main primary operation. And I'm sure there are examples out there that, you see real life operations where it is a farm, which maybe some pumpkin patch or, you pick your own apples and, they have a cidering that's on the property. Like it's minor at is it Rickers Hill? I think of them. Am I saying that right? Is it in Turner, Maine? I think they do agritourism out there.
Well, they're a lot of places,
Yeah.
I've stopped at some place when Alan and I go up north.
Right.
Where there are farms that you can go to. Pick blueberries, strawberries, whatever, but they also have little vendors there
Yeah.
selling things, and. So it's very enjoyable for somebody traveling
Yeah.
to do something like that. I guess we just don't. I think I mean, I would help try to look through some of these, what other towns have done,
Do you have some in mind already?
I could think of a few that we can look at, but yeah. I mean, there's again, more hands equals less work for all
Yeah.
of us. If we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
all take a look and stab at it. And there
Yeah.
might be other states that you like, there might be
Yeah.
some in other New Hampshire, Vermont. I mean, this is New England in general has a
Yeah.
lot of agricultural heritage to pull from.
but then I guess the issue could be, I mean, I think some of our concerns is that this could blow up to be more than what we hope it would be. And how should we have something way in there to pull back? If we have allowed, some farm in town to have this agritourism permission, but they exceed what we think works, it becomes obnoxious.
So we're gonna try our very best to think of every hypothetical scenario possible. But one thing I will caution you on is that, developers, they make a business of looking at even your existing land use ordinance and trying to find the loopholes. And we will do everything in our power to make sure that we try to curb all those what if scenarios. But technology changes, things happen, and innovations occur where now there's a loophole that we didn't think of. I'm thinking right now of the Kennebunk River Committee. They came in front of the select board concerned about houseboats.
Oh, yes, right.
You told me, 10 years ago about houseboats, I wouldn't know what you're talking about. But it's now a concern that we need to address it because it's not in our land use ordinance. And so I know we're gonna try our very best to think of our what if scenarios, and we'll all have our thinking caps on to think of those. But your land use ordinance is a living, breathing document. And you shouldn't feel bad if technology involves and we haven't progressed and changed our ordinance to catch up with a what if scenario. But we'll do our best to try to keep updating the ordinance as we see fit.
It's really hard to, once you put the ordinance out there and people have acted on it, and it's really hard to say, okay, no, we're taking a step back and
Mhm.
we're not going to offer that now. It becomes quite an argument. And so I think that we give it our best shot, but that was one of my thoughts was if we started slow, we could build on something as opposed to regretting that we went too far too fast.
One of the things that concerns me about the conversation, to the point that you're making, I agree with completely. I think we want to have a certain, incentive given to people who want to maintain the rural characteristics of the town, keep it somewhat like it. We found it and maybe even regress a little bit, et cetera, et cetera. In my experience in business or military, we have something called a strategic plan, which is your vision for maybe 5, 10, 15 years in the future. It doesn't have to happen that way because situations change, you have to adapt and everything else. I don't imagine we have a strategic plan for the town, do we?
Yes, we
lay
do.
out-
Yeah.
We do.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me to that extent, but maintain the rural characteristics.
No,
maybe I'm-
we do.
You do, it's called your comprehensive plan that has short-term, medium, and long-term strategies.
Okay, go read it then. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the kind of thing we ought to adopt as our guiding light here. And then together activities in the short term to accomplish those strategic objectives.
Right.
Which
Yeah,
means,
and Liz hit that right on the head when she's described the goal. I mean, that's really what we wrote.
Mhm.
Goal 16 is protecting, farmland and natural forest resources from the impact of development. Right, so that's our driving force. And then supporting farms and protecting farmland is what we have to craft the ordinance around.
Yeah. Do we have in town tax breaks for farms?
Yes.
You do.
That was in the memo that we gave last meeting where there is an exemption for the assessed value of land that is being farmed. And again, the assessor has that, there's a handout that the state has that it depends on what's being cultivated or farmed, depends on what that assessed value is.
And is that where you got your list from, of the farms in town?
Yes, that's in that memo that we sent out to everyone. Yeah. You didn't get it.
So if we send, what is the timeline on this?
So your timeline is, you missed the spring, the June ballot. So it wouldn't be, this wouldn't go on until November. The November ballot. Keep in mind, we're also working on your, stormwater, standards that we have been in discussion. So for the new members here, we were already in the process of discussing, lid development standards. That's low impact design standards for stormwater impacts. So we were looking at that, and again, that got sort of put on the hold when we were discussing the omnibus land use ordinance change that is going in front of the vote. We do need to get the language together. I don't have a timeline. I believe the clerk needs us to send that language by August, if some memory serves me correct, that we have to get that in if we want it for the November ballot. But again, we have other things that we're gonna be working on as well. So I wanted to make you aware of that. The other thing under other business, just to make you aware, and I'll send a follow-up email, since not all the members are here, but we will be having a joint public hearing for the June ballot, for the land use ordinance changes that we're having. This is just a public hearing. We are not commenting on the ordinance at this point. It's been done. The town solicitor has given her blessing on it. The changes have been made. So all it is a listening session. It's a state statute requirement before a land use ordinance is adopted. Our ordinance says the growth planning committee has to be in attendance. State statute says the planning board has to be in attendance. So all three entities are going to be there at that night. I'm gonna get that for you. I believe it's either end of April or beginning of May. So I'll send an email out with what that date is. But I want you to make sure that's on your calendar. It'll be a Thursday evening. And we'll just have a joint session, but we're not commenting on the ordinance. I want to make that abundantly clear. It's only for the public to comment at that point. We've already hashed out all the details for a long time now. So,
But we're supposed to be present.
yes, it'll be like, the Board of Selectmen will be up here and then the GPC will be down there and the planning board. So we will need a quorum. So if you can't make it, please let me know. So we make sure that we have a quorum of each board. That's all we need is a quorum. And we can't redo it, so it's imperative that we do have a quorum to meet the state statute requirements for this ballot initiative. But I'll send you that date.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chairman? So, do I have a motion to adjourn? Are we ready to adjourn? Yeah.
Sure.
Was there something you wanted to say, Dan?
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Who made the motion to adjourn?
I will.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
All
Nice.
That's
We are adjourned at 7:40.
right. Thank you all. Bye-bye.